Welcome to the Art of Fly Fishing. I'm Jan Nemec, Angler Education for the Nevada Department of Wildlife. As we kind of move through this presentation, we'll have you guys input any questions into the Q&A box down below. Everybody will be muted and the chat is turned off. All right, I am going to share a slideshow presentation here, kind of about fly fishing and what it is to me, and definitely some of my favorite parts about it. Of fly fishing. Fly fishing to me is a lot like an art, because an art truly can come from a kindergartner with crayons and can come from a world-renowned fine artist. So Monet, Rembrandt, we've got a lot of amazing artists out there, and art is certainly in the eye of the beholder. So just like art, it can be as big or as little as you want it to be. Fly fishing can be the same. And I love more the freedom of fly fishing and really the ability to put as much or as little as I want into it. And that's certainly my favorite part. Again, sorry if I'm feeding this information to you again. Once again, I'm Jan Nemec, Angler Education from the Department of Wildlife. I wandered the Nevada desert for 18 months, wrote a book on it, fly fishing in the desert, kind of an interesting topic, but very, very fun to do. I love tying flies, I love catching fish, and hopefully it'll come out in this. Okay, so just need to fix, excuse me for just a minute. This is the last seminar of the day, so it's inevitable that we're definitely going to have some technical difficulties. Let's try this again. Might not work, so we might have to flip through them, which is no big deal. All right, let's just do that. Can everybody see my screen? No, let's see.
Yeah, looks good. We can see your PowerPoint.
You can? Okay, great. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, so we'll go through it this way. So what is fly fishing? Fly fishing is fishing with artificial flies that are lures made of fur, feathers, synthetic materials. It is an artificial lure is kind of the key to it. So artificial lure typically weighs nothing. Let's see. The fly itself. All right, here we go. Fly itself, referring to that artificial lure. So the fly, here is, we're looking at the fly's life cycle. So in fly fishing, we fish different stages of the insect's life, or different flies that represent different stages of the insect's life. So here, far left, we have a mayfly nymph, followed by the emerger, where we have flies, wet flies or sinking flies that mayfly nymph, the mayfly emerger. Next to that, the mayfly adult, and then the spent mayfly or the dead mayfly once it's returned to the water surface. So it's laid its eggs at this point, and then we kind of start the whole cycle over. So fly fishing is referring to the fly or the insect where we're representing or we're imitating the different part of its life cycle. So I did say that there are floating flies and sinking flies. So here we've got kind of just a group, again, same as from the last presentation, but just gives us an idea or a general look at some floating or some dry flies and some sinking or some wet flies. So most of the fishing that we do, or 99% of the fishing that we do, is on a floating fly line. So our traditional spinning reels or monofilament or fishing line has a tendency to sink, whereas one of the big differences between fly fishing and spin fishing or traditional fishing is the line itself. So the line in fly fishing is going to float, but you can still fish those sinking flies off of the floating line. Okay, to the important questions. Who can learn to fly fish? Fly fishing has changed quite a bit in the last 10 or 15 years. It's become very, very easy to do. There is equipment available at Walmart. There is equipment available everywhere. It's become very, very reasonable. It was out of reach to a lot of people, and including myself, for a long, long period of time, where it was just hard to get information, hard to get the equipment, and hard to put it all together. But now it's very easy. Obviously with YouTube and a lot of those other places where information lives, it can make finding the information very, very easy. Okay, so generally speaking, who can learn to fly fish? Anybody. This is my son. I think he was about 9 or 10 years old in the picture. From start to finish, he landed that giant fish out of Pyramid. Kind of a neat deal. You don't have to spend years, days, weeks practicing casting to go fly fishing. There are basic casts that you can do with knowing nothing or very, very little. So the casts don't require quite the experience or the practice that has kind of what it's really been known for. So reachable by everybody and certainly available to everybody now. Next important question, where can you fly fish? This is probably just about, actually, this starts and ends with my two favorite places to fly fish. So this is on the Truckee River, but just about any river in a raft is about my favorite place. So I really, really enjoy fly fishing out of boats. It's hard to think about anything else when you're in that position right there, casting off the front of the boat. So worries kind of melt away, and it's a great place to be. So let's look at some more of the detailed places or some more specific locations, I suppose. You can absolutely fly fish in an alpine lake. This picture is of Marlette Lake. Most alpine lakes are going to have abundant trout because they don't see a lot of pressure. They don't have a lot of fishermen visiting. The high lakes tend to have brook trout, which overpopulate, means there's a whole bunch of little ones in a lot of those alpine lakes. I'd call an alpine lake anything above about 9,000 feet. Marlette Lake is a beautiful lake just above Tahoe there. Great place to fly fish seasonally there. All right, next up, you can fly fish in reservoirs. One that's not really, really popular, but certainly a great place to go. Our reservoirs in the West are very fertile because they're flooded plains. They're not natural lakes. They have been man-made or built. And when they flood those plains, we get a lot of vegetation, which in turn brings a lot of insects, which in turn brings a lot of bait fish, and in turn feeds the game fish. So reservoirs can be very fertile and very full of fish. Another great thing about, reservoirs is we often have warm water and cold water species in them. So you can see there's a picture of a bass up. That is a largemouth bass that was caught at Squaw Creek Reservoir. But a lot of times because they're fairly shallow and not natural, you will find, both warm water like bass and then cold water game fish like trout in them. Okay, small lakes. Like an Alpine Lake, maybe a little bit lower elevation. Some of the highlights for me in fly fishing small lakes, like Spooner Lake, is boats. I love float tubes, pontoon boats. Again, obviously from the first slide there, talking about the raft and being out on the river. Small lakes are good because they're safer than big lakes for the float tubes and boats. So it's pretty hard not to catch fish in a float tube trolling that woolly bugger streamer behind you. All right, next up, we have large lakes. And definitely the biggest draw to a large lake is large fish. There, Pyramid Lake, we have Lahontan cutthroat pictured there. It's a world record fishery. It's in our backyard in Reno. If you're Western Nevada, we have people visit this place from all around the world. It is known for fly fishing. It is very, very unique in the sense that somebody that has very little or no fly fishing experience almost has the same odds of catching a fish the size of like this one here on the screen as somebody that has had years and years or decades of experience at the lake. The style or the way that we fly fish at Pyramid Lake is kind of funny. It's very similar to bait fishing with a bobber. Now, bait is illegal, obviously, at Pyramid, not regulated by wildlife. It is on a reservation, so requires a specific license. But to fish it, it's pretty easy. Essentially, you are bobber fishing with a fly fishing pole. You tie a fly on a leader under what we like to refer to as a strike indicator, which is a fancy name for a bobber. Fly fishermen have a tendency to make everything more complicated than it needs to be, including a bobber. So our strike indicator sits out in the water with our fly below it, just like if we were fishing bait somewhere. And that bobber or that strike indicator will go down, it'll dunk, it'll move, it'll do something to indicate that the fish below it has eaten the fly. Now, a lot of those that you can fish at Pyramid are so close to shore that you can almost literally take that fly fishing pole and dunk the flies into the right spot. So it doesn't take a lot of practice to fly fish Pyramid Lake with an indicator or a bobber. All right, next one. This is one of the silly places I feel like I've got posted here. A marsh. This is off the side of the road in South Reno. There are a lot of flooded marshes that are kind of next to roads, rivers, random places, I would certainly say. These in the West pretty much all have carp in them. You can see there is a fly angler there. She has a good little carp that happens to be from Lahontan Reservoir, but in a lot of these marshes scattered around town, if you look real close, you can see some industrial buildings up on the top right of the picture. I kind of tried to not show them, but it is an industrial area in South Reno where there's kind of a marsh off the side of the road. And there are very, very large carp in those. And I don't eat carp, but I certainly like to catch carp. Like a lot of the fish in our area, we have some restrictions of eating them. So I fly fish a lot of times for fun. Okay, urban ponds. Lots of urban ponds available across the West. We certainly have there at Idlewild Park Ponds, and we've got Rancho San Rafael Park. In our area, we have tons of ponds. Our urban ponds, a lot of times, are seasonally planted with trout when temperatures allow. So cooler temperatures, there are trout planted in these to be caught. And the one purpose that they're put into these urban ponds is to be caught and to be taken out. So in addition to trout or stocked trout in our urban ponds or in urban ponds, we'll have warm water game fish. So like this is a bluegill here on the bottom right or on the right-hand side of the screen. And those are very similar to our brook trout in our high mountain lakes where they're very plentiful. They have a tendency to overpopulate, which makes them easy to catch, not very big because they do, again, overpopulate and they can be stunted, but nonetheless, they are cute and easy to catch. So a great addition to some of our urban ponds, and again, good numbers. So it's entertaining catching several fish or a lot of fish in a day. Okay, so slough, kind of similar to that, not similar to the marsh, more like a wetlands, we'll call it. This is Hinkson Slough, down out in Mason Valley, Western Nevada, located on the Mason Valley Wildlife Management Area next to the Mason Valley Fish Hatchery. This water has kind of similar, it's a little bit similar to different ponds. It has similarly stocked trout in it, as well as a naturally reproducing warm water species. So the bass and the bluegill can be found kind of when the trout aren't around. So there's always something to do in the slough. All right, let's talk about a little bit of moving water. So we've talked about a lot of still waters or lakes or reservoirs so far, but not a lot about moving water. Kind of touched base on how to fly fish at, say, like Pyramid Lake, where we're fishing a strike indicator and then a fly that represents food of some sort, a fly, underneath that bobber. When we fish some of the moving water, like creeks, rivers, we like to fish those dry flies and certainly have more opportunities to fish some of those dry flies in the creek and the river settings. Here we've got Galena Creek. This is a very, very small creek. A lot of times you won't find that fish are overpopulating, but certainly can find good populations in creeks. One good general rule to fishing in rivers and creeks, the further back you go, the better the fishing is. So a lot of times walking a little bit of is a good thing and a good way to find better water and more fish. The dry flies, those terrestrial insects like grasshoppers and ants are always falling out of the bushes and the trees. So again, fishing these smaller creeks, it doesn't require that big, beautiful fly cast that that you see in the movies and all over the place. A lot of times you are just feeding line and feeding the fly downstream because that's your only option on a lot of these smaller pieces of water. Great for taking a walk, that's for sure. Okay, some other rivers, some bigger rivers. Just like the bigger lakes, bigger rivers, you're gonna find some bigger fish. That is the brown trout that I was talking about loving so much in that last. This is a specimen, beautiful, beautiful brown trout from the Truckee River, caught on not a dry fly, caught on a wet fly that represented one of those bait fish. So again, kind of a good general rule, big flies, big fish is a good one, but it's not always the case. I have certainly caught some very, very good sized fish on some very, very small flies. And finally, there aren't a lot of restrictions to where you can fish, and certainly not the ocean. I fly fish in the ocean. Absolutely, this is the Pacific surf. So this is not Nevada. This is over in California, but I just wanted to show it to just kind of give you an idea that there are no limits to it. So again, where we started with art being as big or as little as you want it to be, the ocean's pretty big. And there are some very big fish in the ocean, and there is a lot of fish in the ocean. There in the photograph, you see a barred surf perch, and it's very similar to that bluegill that I pointed out a little while ago at the urban ponds. Very plentiful. When you find them, you can catch a ton of them, and it can make for a very entertaining day, that's for sure. Some more of the ocean fishing that takes place, some of the hard to believe places. There's a gentleman out of San Diego that has become very, very good, very knowledgeable about fly fishing for sharks. So we have fly fishing for sharks. We have fly fishing in the Amazon basin for peacock bass and fish like the arowana. There's araprima. There are no limits to what you can reach with the fly rod. All right, and I think that is the end of the slideshow.
Jan, we'll just ask one question because we are just about out of time, but we did have lots of people asking which body of water is your favorite to fish in of all of the ones you talked about?
The Truckee River, because it's kind of my home water. So everybody loves home. So the Truckee is certainly my favorite place to be fishing.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And that wraps it up for today.